Hey, 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 hey. We're back and we're ready to roll with the top 70 albums of the 70s. Woo!
Yeah.
Yes. Here we are back again. This time we are starting this countdown on my channel here. But guys, if you're just joining us in this series, and if you had only seen part of the 60s series or haven't seen it all, you guys got to subscribe to Joni Radio. Not only is this channel great, but we're going to be alternating these episodes back and forth on these channels like we did with the 60s albums of the 60s. And man, I mean, as we said, this is our favorite decade of music, so I can't wait to talk about these albums, either good or not as good. But I don't think there's a bad album on here at all, or even one I dislike.
Yeah, I'm so excited, man. I mean, this is as fun as the 60s was, I feel like that was just teeing up the 70s here, because, like you said, it's both of our favorite decades, and I'm sure many of the viewers as well. And I mean, just, look at my wall of perfect albums. That takes the majority of them. But yeah, so many great choices, guys. So many votes. I mean, over 40 of you voted. I think the one with the most votes had over like 1,000 votes. There were over 500 albums that made the list, so only 70 to talk about. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, after we get through the list, we're going to do a whole episode of albums that we both thought should have made the list, because there were so many, so much greatness.
It's ridiculous how much stuff was left off this list. Like, I'm actually kind of mad about it still.
Yeah,
but obviously we won't say what didn't make the list, because obviously we got to get to what did make the list. So let's kick this right off at number 70.
Well, I dreamed I saw the knights in armor come.
After the Gold Rush from 1970 by Mr. Neil Young. Had to had Uncle Neil on the list. And really, this album wasn't even on my list, which I think tells you just how great this decade is, because I absolutely love this album. I'm not as huge on Neil Young as everybody else, but this is my favorite Neil Young album. And obviously, I love Neil Young. I mean, he's one of the most talented songwriters out there, has one of the most unique voices, and really defined that singer-songwriter folk style in the 1970s. And then obviously, as he became known, the godfather of grunge. But this is obviously more in that folk rock vein, with beautiful songs like Tell Me Why, and obviously the title track, which is so amazing, and Only Love Can Break Your Heart. Just some of the most beautiful melodies, and in the way he harmonizes, either with his band Crazy Horse or just himself. I believe it's just himself. So beautiful. And of course that title track, where it's like, I was dreaming of a knight in armor coming, talking something about a queen, and just that voice.
No one sounds like that.
No one sounds like Neil Young. It is just absolutely beautiful in the way he delivers these songs. And then of course you have Southern Man, which is easily my favorite song on this album, where he's talking about the racism in the Deep South, and in the lynching and the burnings of crosses. Just that line where he's saying, I see crosses burning, and I'm going to cut, woman, I'm going to cut your man down. And then he just goes on that crazy guitar solo, which obviously he would even perfect later on in the 70s. I mean, one of the greatest guitarists ever. I mean, without a question. And yet again, no one sounds like him singing wise, but guitar wise too. I mean, that tone is
guitar wise. Yeah, I was gonna say, even his rhythm guitar playing, like, it's him, just the tone of the guitar right away. You're like, that is Neil Young, man. And yeah, Southern Man, I think, is the standout track for me personally. I tend to like his rockers more in general, but the title track as well is beautiful, and I think very poetic to be the first album on our list here. We got Mother Nature on the Run in the 1970s. So yeah, great start here. And it's not my favorite Neil album. I understand why a lot of people love it. It didn't make my list either, but I totally understand the love for it. I feel like this was Neil kind of coming into his own, especially vocally, and coming along with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. But also, this was his second album, His first one was great as well, though. I love it.
I think this is his third actually, because he had Neil Young and then he had Everybody Knows This Is
That's
Nowhere,
right.
which is
That's right.
also really good. I like that one a lot too.
Exactly. But yeah, and many more great ones to come, man. I mean, he, like Dylan, and just there's a short list of these guys that are this many decades in and still doing their thing at a high level.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, and in this album, I as I said, I do think it's his best. My biggest problem with him, probably why it's not on my 70s list, I think the structure of it's a little off. And also you have covers like Oh Lonesome Me, which are good, but and there are songs like When I Dance, I Can Really Love You, which I think is okay. I mean, lyrically, it's nowhere near as good as the other songs. And then just to end on Cripple Creek Ferries, like that's a really weird ending.
Yeah.
Not a bad song, but it's like it just doesn't make sense considering how great, especially the first half of this album is. But yeah, I mean, really, what a great way to start off this list. I'm so, even though it wasn't on my list, I'm really happy that After the Gold Rush did end up making the cut, even if it was just barely. And now that leads us on to number 69.
Love came to my door with a sleeping roll and the madman.
Court and Spark by Joni Mitchell. Yeah, guys, obviously you knew Joni Mitchell was going to be on this list. And I don't think this may be the last time we'll see her. We'll see. But yeah, this is such a great album. And obviously this is quite a departure from Blue, really. And I absolutely love that because it's very much jazz influence. These songs are very jazzy. The melodic structures go off in these surprising directions, but yet it feels like her most accessible record too. And obviously that helped with the hit single, her biggest hit of her entire career, with Help Me, which is just that help me, I think I'm falling in love again, with the beautiful, absolutely, man, with the beautiful Joni Mitchell vocals. But this whole thing, I mean, there's not a weak song on here at all, though I'm not necessarily huge on Troubled Child, but it's still not bad at all. But really, just Free Man in Paris is a beautiful song. Kind of, she wrote about David Geffen trying to get away from all the music industry for a while and just trying to like get some peace of mind. But you really see, because obviously this is more accessible and it's obviously not as soul bearing as something like Blue is. But I love, you get to see like her insecurities on songs like People's Parties and the same situation, which are absolutely stunning lyrically, and the way they segue into one another is just absolutely beautiful. In songs like Down to You, which yet again is another really personal song, and how she views fame in some regard, but also there's just some really fun tracks like Raised on Robbery, which is a great character piece about this con woman trying to con this man who thinks she's like a prostitute or whatever. And I just have to mention my favorite song on here is actually the closing track, listening again, Twisted, which I think might be Joni Mitchell's best vocal performance I've ever heard. It's a cover, but just the way she's able to deliver this jazz melody and able to not only hit every single note, but is able to inflect the humor in the song as well, and the emotion. It really is like, if you don't think Joni Mitchell is one of the greatest vocalists, I mean, this is proof right here. I've never heard anything better, and it's so much fun too. It's hysterical. But yeah, this album is just so great, and honestly, I think a little low on this list. What is it doing this low? This should at least be, I think, like, I don't know, 20 spots up. But I'm glad it made the list, though, because this is an absolutely fantastic record. And yeah, once again, I'm glad to see it on here.
I'm surprised, actually, it did make the list. And I'm glad it did as well. As you can tell from my wall, I am a Joni fan. Blue is one of my favorite records of all time. This one I don't like as much, and it didn't make my list personally, but for all the same reasons you mentioned. I mean, and for a fan of Blue as well, like if you're not familiar with this album, I like how the title track that opens the record almost feels a little like the piano sound of Blue. It kind of draws you in to that style. But then she takes you in these different kind of more jazzy directions as the album goes, but still very catchy. And, nobody sounds like Joni Mitchell. Like we already got two of the most iconic voices of the 70s on
Canadian
our list so
singers
far.
too.
Yeah, exactly. And her soprano is just, unmatched. And like you said on the closing track, unbelievable some of the things that she does vocally. And I think a lot of people take her vocals for granted, but she's one of the best, not just singer songwriters ever, but definitely singers. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely, man. And it's sad that she can't, quite get to that anymore with all her
Sure.
years behind her. But I just think the arrangements on this album are so tastefully done. It's so beautiful, and,
Yeah.
and I just think it shows like how diverse of an artist she is, where she's able to go something like Blue and then completely change it up. And then of course you also have like the hissing of summer lawns
Yeah.
and Hey
Taking it
Jira.
even further. Yeah.
Exactly, man. And then she was like doing stuff with Mingus, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy like how diverse of an artist, and that's what I love about her. Is always switching it up, just like the best of them, like Dylan, like Prince.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is a great album. As I said, great to see it here, and that will take us to number 68. American Beauty by the Grateful Dead. I'm not surprised this album made the list because it actually made the Nathaniel Ahart and Company's top 100. But yeah, I mean, I get it. This was another one that's wasn't on my list, but I absolutely love this album, and not my favorite Grateful Dead studio album. Actually, I actually like their debut in Working Man's Dead from actually I believe the same year.
Hmm.
Crazy that they were coming out with these albums left and right, but yeah, this is an absolute classic. Just opening with the Phil Lesh pen track "Box of Rain," which is just such a great song on its own right. But just, I mean, so many absolute classics in their catalog here, like Ripple, which is just so beautiful. Sugar Magnolia, which is such a classic Bob Weir track. And of course, obviously Truckin', which closes this thing out. Which is just so iconic, that line, that mantra, what a long, strange trip it's been, but such a fun song nonetheless. But really, I think my favorite Grateful Dead song on here is Friend of the Devil, which, I mean, just talk about guitarist. Jerry Garcia is
Great
like one.
song.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, absolutely amazing. And he's one of my top 5 favorite guitarists of all time. I even put him above Clapton. I just think he was so technical and such, regardless of how you feel about the Grateful Dead. I mean, there's no denying his chops as a musician. He was one of the best. And here you get to hear that acoustic style folk country playing that, he was so known for. But just this great story of this outlaw running through the hills and just got 2 reasons why I cry away each lonely night. First one's named Sweet Anne-Marie, and she's my heart's delight. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, I absolutely love this song. It really is, I think, as I said, my favorite Grateful Dead song. The reason this album didn't make my list is probably because I find a lot of the other songs to be pretty boring. Like Addicts of My Life and Until the Morning Comes, definitely not better than the Neil Young song, I'll tell you that. But yeah, I mean, the best songs on here are just the best in their career, besides a few that stand out. And so yeah, I'm glad this album made the list. You had to have the Grateful Dead on a 70s list, no question about it.
Yeah, it's good to see them, get recognized here. And I'm not a huge Grateful Dead fan. I can't even say that I've listened to more than a couple of their albums. I don't know that I'd use the word boring, but I'm just not really that into their style overall. However, the songs that you mentioned are all classics. Everybody knows Truckin', of course. Box of Rain too, I believe, was used really well in the series Freaks and Geeks, if you've ever seen that show.
Oh yeah, there's a whole episode. I haven't seen it
Yeah.
yet, but I know there's a whole episode dedicated to American Beauty, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
devoted to it. And it kind of changes the course of like a character's entire life. So which I can definitely see how that could happen with a band like this. And the whole jam band experience and touring that goes with it. But yeah, glad to see that they made the list. And I think it's at a pretty good spot.
I do too. Considering it didn't make my list, I am happy to see where it is. And I will say I've listened. I'm not a Deadhead, but I do love the Grateful Dead, and I've listened to a lot of their studio albums. And I can tell you that this is like probably top three. You know, actually, my favorite Dead album is not even a studio album, which I guess makes sense considering they were a jam band. But I think Europe '72, which also didn't make my list, I think that tells you yet again how great the '70s was. I just think it is absolutely fantastic. And really showed them at the peak of their powers. But yeah, guys, this obviously, if you're going to represent the Dead at all, this is usually the one people gravitate towards. So yeah, great to see it here. And that will take us to number 67.
Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division from 1979. Now, the end of the decade, and a totally different style from Grateful Dead, to say the least. And, you know, this band has influenced so many other bands. You can tell that just from you know, the first couple of tracks here. It's very kind of dark and synthy. You know, some 80s bands like New Order, of course, were coming on the scene around the same time, but you can see how even bands to this day like Radiohead took some cues from them. You know, the opening track Disorder is very cool. Day of the Lords, I think, is my favorite track on here, the second one. It just has, like, even though the music doesn't get super heavy, there's like the dark weight of it. I don't know how to quite explain it. Just kind of gets under your skin in a way that's it's almost disturbing in a way in some of the songs. But also they remain somewhat catchy, even though I'm not a huge fan of the vocals of the band. And I think that's my biggest issue with why I don't enjoy them more. But I can see why a lot of people do, again, just because, if nothing more, for the influence that they had, especially at the time. There was no one else really doing anything quite like this. But yeah, it wasn't on my list, obviously. So how about you?
No, it wasn't on mine either. And I think for the same reasons, I agree with you. Like, I just think this is an album I respect more than I really love. And I think it's because Ian Curtis's vocals are really kind of drowned in the mix. I do love how it's reminiscent of the Velvet Underground in that sense. But after a while, it just, I don't know. I hate to, I don't want to kind of like be deductive, obviously, of the situation that happened, but it's kind of funereal, which I think adds to the tragedy of Ian Curtis. And it's great you mentioned New Order, because obviously these band members would go on to form New Order after the death of Ian Curtis. But yeah, I mean, it's just not pleasant to listen to. And I know that seems like kind of a cop-out, considering some other albums that I'm going to talk about on this list, but I guess the production is really what does, like, just a mix of that. It just doesn't completely do it for me, but I completely get, I mean, this is an incredibly seminal post-punk record, which has had so much influence later on, as you were mentioning. And of course, like, moments like I Remember Nothing, where he's like smashing the chair, like you hear it breaking in the background. It's really unsettling, and it really does get under your skin and unnerves you. But yeah, I mean, I respect it. And obviously I'm not surprised this made the list, because this also made the Nathaniel Ahart and Company's top 100 list. Granted, it was in the first episode, so sure. Yeah, I get why it's here. Not my favorite, but I can respect it though. So yeah. We got Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division on here, and that will take us right to number 66.
Standing on the corner,
Loaded by the Velvet Underground. Yet again, all of their studio albums with Lou Reed have made all of the iterations of our list. We don't count the one with Doug Yule, but yeah, this one, I mean, talk about switching it up. I think most people would say this was the Velvet Underground sellout album. But yeah, I mean, Lou Reed could have been writing songs this accessible and this catchy from the get, and he waited till the last record he made with this band. And man, I mean, as I I might have stated this before, but the Velvet Underground is one of the only two bands, including the Jimi Hendrix Experience, where I love every single one of their studio albums. That just doesn't happen. But this one, it's so great, especially kicking off with Who Loves the Sun, which I still think sounds very much like it was from the 60s, but it's so catchy. How can you not love the ba 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 who loves the sun? It's just so amazing. And then of course you have Sweet Jane, which is just
that's my favorite. That's my favorite Velvet Underground track, period. I mean,
I can't blame him, especially with that standing on the corner, suitcase in my hand. And I just love Lou Reed's. This is some of the best and most funniest Lou Reed delivery I ever heard on any song, especially when it's like, and Jane, she's a
clerk. Yeah. And both of them saved their monies.
Yeah, it just ridiculous. The riff on it is amazing. And then of course you follow it up with Rock and Roll, which is just another absolute banger of a song in the Velvet Underground's discography, and probably I'd say my third favorite. I think the first three songs on this album are the best, but even so, like New Age is really great. We're just talking about this fat old actress, this blonde actress. And some people say he may be talking about his bisexuality on there too, with Frank and Marie, or Frank and Nancy. I was thinking the Everybody Loves Raymond there. But yeah, I mean, just all these songs are so catchy. I Found a Reason is so funny, where it's like this really like dumbed down love ballad, but you have Lou Reed talking over it. It's like, I found a reason, and baby, it's you. And you can tell like just how ironic he's being. But even so, Train Around the Bend is another absolute banger. And of course, Oh Sweet Nothing, which is the last track on here, a great way to close out the discography, especially considering that Maureen Tucker wasn't even on this album because she was pregnant at the time. Though she is credited, it was actually, I believe, Doug Yule's brother who was playing drums on here. So I think that's really, really interesting, at least on a few of the songs. And I think Doug Yule might have been actually playing the majority of the drummers. So as much as people don't talk about Doug Yule, I mean, he's a really talented guy. And I just think this is such a great classic rock record. It's just so accessible. It's so much fun. And certainly the most accessible from the Velvet Underground.
Yeah. Not to go back to Sweet Jane again, but there's just so many great lines like, all you protest kids, you can hear Jack say, Sweet Jane. Whoa. Yeah. So over the top, man. I have for that song alone, I'm cool with it being on the list. As you know, I'm not quite as big a Velvet Underground fan as you are, but I knew you were psyched that they made it. Just barely squeaked in, man.
I was so happy that they made it on. But it goes to show how great they were, and that a lot of you guys did love this album. So really happy to see it. And I think this is an appropriate spot for it too. I wouldn't put it much higher. So yeah, great pick at number 66. Now will take us to number 65.
I looked out this morning and the sun was gone.
Boston, the debut album from Tom Schultz and the gang. And really, I think that, there's probably no other better studio album from them. They saved the best right from the get, breaking open the floodgates with their most iconic song, More Than a Feeling, which, I mean, oh my goodness, especially this whole first side of this album, just cornerstones of classic rock radio, if this whole album isn't. But just that amazing acoustic guitar intro followed up with the layers of overdubs that Tom Schultz did with that, and then that chorus, more than a feeling, it's just so amazing. And the fact that this whole album was recorded in his basement is unbelievable, because the production on this album is absolutely incredible. It's albums like this and the score by the Fugees just absolutely blow my mind that they sound, and When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go, blow my mind that they sound as good as they do, considering the setting which they were recorded. But obviously following up More Than a Feeling, you got Peace of Mind, which is another just absolute classic. Foreplay Long Time, which the instrumental is so good they even play the whole song on classic rock radio. Then of course you have other classics like Rock and Roll Band. Smoking I'm not huge on. I think it's kind of okay, but a lot of people seem to love that one. But I love stuff like Let Me Take You Home Tonight, which is such a great way to close. It starts off as the slow ballad, and then the ending where the instrumentals just ramp up. It's so powerful, it's so euphoric, and a great way to close out one of the most iconic classic rock albums of all time. And I just think, yet again, goes to show like the timelessness of these songs. And I just have to mention Tom Schultz is one of the best guitar players I've ever heard, and I think goes unmentioned because Boston doesn't have the critical reception like other band like contemporaries like Van Halen did, even though this album is so great. So I just wanted to mention, and Brad Delp is an incredible vocalist, especially when he's like on More Than a Feeling was like he's like going all the way up there, just so underrated. And yeah, I absolutely, this actually was number 70 on my list. So I guess it just nudged its way on, but I'm glad to see it here. It's an absolute cornerstone of classic rock radio.
Yeah, another one. Actually, I don't think any of these have made my list thus far, which is like, what's going on here? But no, this one did not as well, even though, yeah, like you said, it is a staple of classic rock radio. I think it was bands like this and Journey who, although, obviously have the technical chops are just like incredible on songs like More Than a Feeling. The harmonies on the guitar solos and the vocals are just like stellar. But when I was coming of age, in my teenage years and early 90s, and I would hear bands like Nirvana like purposefully make fun of the riff of More Than a Feeling, and the story was that Cobain essentially did a play on that riff to make Smells Like Teen Spirit, and he was sort of like making fun of that style, even though it went on to be a huge commercial success, much to his chagrin. But you can't listen to side A of this album and not be just overjoyed with the sound, as you said, like the fact that it was recorded in their basement. I didn't even know that. That's incredible. Because it sounds like better than most things produced at that time. So yeah, I'm not super excited about it being on the list, but I will tolerate it.
Okay, I guess I'll take that.
No, it's not really a bad album whatsoever. A great debut album, for God's sakes.
Oh my goodness, not one of the best, but it's certainly one that stands out above others. And I also just think, yeah, Tom Schultz really put all his cards on one table for this one, and was never quite able to capture the success of it again. But man, I just, and even Peace of Mind, just the lyrically, like it has a lot of social critiques about, climbing the corporate ladder and just trying to actually just live your life without having to worry about, climbing over anyone else. I think there's some great messages in there, which the first time I heard it, I didn't expect. I just thought it was going to be a bunch of classic rock bangers, which it certainly is, but it's definitely a little bit more than that. And I think that is why it made it on this list. And obviously that album cover is amazing with the spaceship and the guitar. I mean, it's so 70s, but in like the best way possible. So totally. Yeah, great pick, guys. So glad to see this one on the list. And that will take us to number 64.
Ain't no sunshine when she's gone.
Just As I Am, the debut studio album from Mr. Bill Withers, the late, great Bill Withers. Man, I don't know what this is doing so low on this list. Maybe not all of you've heard it, but I think the people who had know that this album is just incredible. And I think one of the greatest debut albums of all time, because think about this too, like Bill Withers was in his early 30s when he came on the scene with this. So the maturity in his songwriting was already leaps and bounds above other people who debuted in like, let's say their 20s. I mean, and especially kicking this thing off with a Harlem, which this album is what I would call soul or folk soul. I've never heard anything like it. Bill Withers is one of those artists, has a very distinctive style, but starting off with Harlem, it's just so groovy with the Saturday night in a Harlem, and just the way he's describing this area. And I just love where it's like where he's like talking about the Saturday night, all the folks just went to all the hip folks just went to sleep and all the good folks just got up, Sunday morning. I just
Yeah.
love the way he's so descriptive about the people and the places that he's interacting with in his songs. And then of course you have Ain't No Sunshine, which is probably his most famous song. I don't even think the best on this album, because lyrically I think their songs are better. But how can you not love that? Ain't no
Classic.
sunshine when she's gone. And the fact he says I know like 26 times and like doesn't even like lose a breath. It's so impressive vocally. I think he's one of the most underrated vocalists. You hear his voice, nobody sounds like him, but his voice is so mellow, it's so welcoming, it really draws you in his songs.
And,
then,
and musically, that song too, like so simplistic, and just the acoustic guitar and the bass very light, but then when those strings come in, man, and really elevate it to another level, it's like, oh yes, dude, I absolutely love it.
Dude, yeah, he takes like those strings from like his contemporaries like Curtis Mayfield were using and utilize them to his own benefit, and it's just absolutely incredible. It has that classic soul sound while still feeling like something else entirely, like very folky, as I said. And of course songs like Grandma's Hands, once again, he had a song that's so underplayed, but talking about his grandmother who was born into slavery, and this is what I love about his lyricists. I think he's one of the greatest songwriters ever, and I think just goes so unmentioned, and luckily he was inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame prior to his death, which it was certainly deserved. But just the way he's like, the way he tells the story about his grandma and how he portrays her experience, like that line where she's like helping the unwed mother, and there's that line, it's like, grandma understands that you really love that man, tells you everything you need to know about that situation without even saying like more than 10 words, and talking about how this woman, this man abandoned her with her child, and how she can tell that she's still in love with him. I mean, it is so brilliant the way he fills the spaces, and that's what I mean. The maturity on this is just incredible. And of course, like songs like Sweet Wyoming are just so, the way it's so melodic, but the way he's just describing this very intimate moment of these two lovers just in bed, and they wake up in the middle of the night, and they just kind of have this sweet moment where they're like moving their, like in the room full of soft satin pillows, she covers up her face when she yawns. It's just so simplistic what he's talking about, but it's so beautiful. And then of course the covers on here too, I absolutely love. I love his funky, soulful cover of Everybody's Talking, originally obviously made famous by Harry Nilsson.
Right.
And of course I even love his soul cover of Let It Be. It is so great. And I'm not a huge fan of a lot of Beatles covers, but this one is amazing. And then songs like I'm Her Daddy, that might actually be my favorite on here, where it's this father like trying, it starts off, it's kind of similar to Memphis, Tennessee by Chuck Berry, where he's like talking about this girl, have you seen her? And then it's revealed later on that he's actually the father trying to get in contact with his daughter, though here she doesn't know who he is. And it's just such a heartbreaking song.
Yeah, he's such a great songwriter, man. And I'm so happy that he's made the list. I actually like Still Bill even better than this record.
It's great.
I mean, there's so many great songs like Use Me and so far. I'm not going to go on and on about another album, but Just As I Am is an absolute classic for all the ones that you mentioned. And again, musically, Grandma's Hands, a lot of people don't realize, was sampled for No Diggity by Blackstreet. That that thing is so cool, man. Like you don't realize, again, the simplicity in both his songwriting and just the overall style, as you call it, kind of like folk soul, it's just brilliant, man. And he's such a down-to-earth, cool guy that writes from experience. I actually watched the Still Bill documentary.
I saw that, yeah,
and it's just awesome, man. He was just so great, and sad that he didn't get as many accolades until later in life, but at least he got them. I mean, well deserved, man. Just absolutely one of the greatest artists of that decade, if not of all time.
And yeah, man, he's one of my favorite singer-songwriters of all time, up there with like Joni Mitchell and Jim Croce and all of them. I just think he's absolutely brilliant. And even songs like, I just have to mention songs like Hope She'll Be Happier and In My Heart, where he'll like use the instrument, or he'll dial back on the instrumentation, and he'll like do these crescendos and decrescendos, and then you just he does it so you focus on what he's saying, and you get into the the lyrics and really hang on to every word. I mean, it's just brilliant. My only problem with this album, if it weren't for a couple of things, this album would have actually made my top 10 of the 70s, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But I think as great as it is, Better Off Dead is a really strange closer to the album, very abrupt, and I don't know how I feel about that. And Do It Good is very, very repetitive. But it's interesting he mentioned Booker T, the producer on it. So I didn't realize till later. I was like, oh, that's Booker T, you know, of Booker T and the MGs. So but yeah, I mean, guys, if you haven't heard this album, please check it out. I mean, it really is one of the best albums ever, and that's not just going for debut albums. It's way too low on this list, honestly. So yeah, guys, and that's only at number 64. So what could be a number 63 now?
Deja Vu by Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. This time they made the list, the follow-up to Crosby, Stills, and Nash, which made the 60s list. And you know, going into this, I had never heard this album until about a week ago. And as I had said, in the 60s, I wasn't a big fan of them, but I think I'm becoming a fan, man. And maybe it's the Young factor that I really dig, especially on, you know, some of the rockier songs like Almost Cut My Hair that he also sings lead on. I think he sings lead on that one.
That's David. That's a David Crosby
It
song.
Is Crosby. Okay, that's right.
Crosby.
But Young does sing lead on a couple songs like Helpless, which is a great ballad. Of course, you got Teach Your Children, which everyone knows that song. It's a classic. Our House. Lots of stuff on here that I was like, oh yeah, I know that song. You know, it was like deja vu listening to this, but you know, overall, I would say side A is much stronger than side B. You know, towards the end, I'm not crazy about the last couple songs, but yeah, I really enjoyed this, and you know, probably would have came close to making my list had I not already completed it. I liked it that much, so.
Man, what a turnaround, really.
I know, right?
And I just have to mention the second appearance already of Neil Young on this list. So that's kind of great. Already 2 Neil Young albums. But yeah, you know, for me, it's like this is Crosby, Stills, and Nash. This is Deja Vu. It's like right there, but I think I have to give this one the edge, especially opening with Carry On. It's just the harmonies. One morning I woke up, and you know, it's just such a great song. I mean, just that midsection where it's just the three of them singing in harmony. It's just absolutely beautiful. But then again, of course, you have songs like Teach Your Children, which actually might be my favorite Crosby, Stills, and Nash song, with that beautiful steel guitar playing by no other than Jerry Garcia. And I think, yeah, it's like once you hear it, it's very obvious that it's him. But just, you know, I think the best song Graham Nash ever wrote, you know, teach your children well, their fathers held and slowly go by.
And the harmonies really do sound beautiful on that one, especially. I mean,
it's one of those things where all the elements of the song just come so perfectly together. And then of course you have their cover of Woodstock, which I think is even better than the Joni Mitchell version. One of those covers where it's, you know, even better. That doesn't happen too often with her. But of course, also, I mean, so many great songs. Our House is another beautiful, and I think actually Graham Nash wrote that about Joni Mitchell because he was with her at the time, and they're like talking about the house with the garden they live in, and just that. Our house is a very, very, very fine house. You know, it's as you said, it is like deja vu listening to this album because all these songs are so iconic. And then 4+20, I have to mention, if you need further proof that Stephen Stills is an incredible songwriter. That's it right there. Easily the darkest song on the album, the most brief, but I think it certainly leaves an impact. But yeah, I think you're right. It kind of peters off. And I'm not as huge on songs like Almost Cut My Hair, which is kind of like, to me, it's kind of like that, you know, very juvenile hippie sort of sentiments. I don't really.
I just love Neil's guitar playing on that one, man. It's so good.
Right.
You again, you know, it's Neil playing it. So
sure, yeah, because you can definitely tell the difference between him and Jerry Garcia. So interesting that they're converging now. Even we just talked about them.
It's all connected, man.
It really is. That tells you like how many great musicians especially in California at this time. We're just
Mhm.
together and making this great music, collaborating with. And also, I forgot to mention on American Beauty, for Working Man Dead and American Beauty, Crosby, Stills, and Nash are the ones that taught Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir and Ron Pigpen McKernan and all them to do those 3-part harmonies and stuff. So really just the way they influenced each other. I certainly don't think this is better than American Beauty or even After the Gold Rush, which was the album that I believe succeeded this for Neil Young. But it certainly is an iconic record, and I'm fine with it being on the list. I really, really like this album, just like the first one.
Yeah, I'm totally cool with it. When I first saw it on the list, I was like, man, damn it. But now, after I've listened to it and gave it its fair listen, I'm like, no, I get it totally. So I'm happy about it.
I don't like it better than Just As I Am, though. Just saying, I don't.
Same, yeah. No, I agree totally.
It's okay. It is a really good album, and yeah, guys, that's going to take us to number 62.
The Last Waltz by the band from 1978, their farewell performance in a concert experience, which if you haven't seen the film as well, directed by none other than Martin Scorsese, do yourself a favor and do that. And yes, Nathaniel, I'm talking to you as well, because I know you haven't seen or heard this yet. So I don't want to give too much away as I'm talking about it.
You could
but
talk.
It's incredible. First of all, like this, I had heard, some of the songs by the band, like The Weight, of course, songs you hear on the radio, but it wasn't until I saw the film that I was like, oh my God, these guys were incredible. Robbie Robertson on guitar, and especially just watching it, but of course, listening to it after the fact. I mean, I feel like the live versions of most of their songs are the best versions of them, like Up on Cripple Creek, It Makes No Difference, which is an amazing performance by Rick Danko. And you also forget that the band talk about 3-part harmonies. I mean, all the vocalists, Levon Helm, Danko, and Richard Manuel, yes. All 3 of them are great vocalists, but then you have all the other musicians that played a part in this experience, like Neil Young once again showing up and actually singing Helpless on this, which is one of the best performances. Joni Mitchell accompanying him on that track. You got Van the Man Morrison doing Caravan, which is incredible. You've got Bob Dylan, for God's sake, Eric Clapton. I mean, Ringo Starr even playing drums towards the end. My gosh. But yeah, songs like The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down are huge with the whole orchestra. They just went for it, man. Ophelia as well. This jazzy song that has all these wind instruments playing on it. Just fantastic. And then closing it down with I Shall Be Released, with everybody on stage singing it. It's incredible, man. I don't know what else to say, but this was, you can tell this one was on my list.
You're getting me pumped, man. I mean, considering I'm such a huge Scorsese fan, and I love concert films like Stop Making Sense. It's one of those films I've been trying to get to watch for a while, but I just haven't gotten to it. So I definitely am going to get to this soon and listen to the album, because I've heard a lot of people say it's the best concert film of all time. And I want to see, especially with all the names you named there, I can certainly see how that could be the case. Don't have too much to say about this one, but it is the only album on this list I haven't heard. So that's out of the way. So we're good.
I wouldn't say that it's my favorite concert film technically, but it's a close number 2. But it's not just a concert film, it's also a documentary, and the interviews with the band are incredible. Robbie Robertson especially is such a great storyteller, not just in his songwriting, but just behind the scenes. But yeah, man, there's also in the film, especially to watch Muddy Waters, man, perform Manish Boy, and you can just tell they're all just like watching him, it's incredible. But yeah, the sound on this is so good. Again, this is I think the best entry point into the band, because it's them at their most exciting, probably also a little revved up on cocaine, but
well, yeah,
it was the 70s. So
Marty
but
there
yeah,
with them.
exactly. But yeah, just fantastic. So glad it made the list, man.
I'm excited to check it out at some point soon. And so, yeah, I'm just going to say by default, great choice, guys.
Yeah.
And that will take us to the final pick of this episode at number 61. And at 61, we have the brilliantly constructed concept album, Berlin, by none other than Lou Reed. I guess you could say the second appearance of Lou Reed on this album, this list, technically. But I guess I can understand why this album's so low. But I think this is one of the greatest albums ever made. This is like top 20 albums of all time for me, because I just think the depths of despair that Lou Reed reaches down on this album. I don't think that there's really many concept albums that are executed better than this. I mean, and just the way he repurposes old songs he wrote, like the title track, so brilliantly, setting us off in this lovely date between Jim and Caroline, starting off this very, very nefarious relationship, just to say the very least.
Yeah.
But I mean, just as the album goes along, the first time I heard this, the first half didn't really do it for me. But when I got to Caroline Says Too, where he's like, she's knocked her on the floor, so I was like, wait, what? And that was when I was like paid attention, and I was absolutely horrified for the rest of the album, and probably for the rest of the night, because this is like the most, I mean, you talk about Blue being devastating. This is the most devastating album I've ever heard. It's by far the most depressing, but I don't look at it as the depression porn or anything like that, because I think it's such a great character study. And when you get character studies in the album format, you really don't. And it's really a look at this psychopath, Jim, and how he views this woman, especially when he sings sad song in like in the bed at the end, where he's like basically saying, well, I don't want to spoil the album too much if you haven't heard it, but the things he says about his wife are like the most disparaging things I've ever heard in my entire life. But songs like The Kids, which is my favorite one on here, is just absolutely devastating, especially hearing the cries of these children just in this just awful situation. Man, it's absolutely brilliant the way they set up his drug problems, the way they set up Caroline. I just, the way they come together in such a toxic, in such a violent way. I mean, really, this is like unbelievable. I can't believe someone came up with it. It's like writing a script. And that's why I think it's such a brilliant album. And one of the reasons why Lou Reed is one of my favorite artists of all time, because he was so transgressive in writing, talking about these topics that nobody was going after at the time. And I even think this is better than the Velvet Underground and Nico. There, I said it. It's just absolutely incredible, though I don't think it is his best album. I mean, what is that saying? It's one of the best ever, I think. And I know it's divisive, and that's why you're probably happy it's lower down on the list.
Yeah, I mean, I get why you hold it in high regard, especially, from the storytelling standpoint. It's just one that I don't feel like I would revisit often because of it being so dark and depressing. But all that being said, I do think it's a pretty strong effort for Lou, especially in, he did accomplish what he set out to do, and telling a story of this couple and the craziness that ensues. But and there are some good melodies along the way, like Men of Good Fortune, I think stands out. Lady Day, I'm not that much a fan of. But yeah, I think if you're in for the ride, it's not a bad one. It's just not one that I listen to often, which is why it's not on my list. But I do love Lou Reed, and there is another album that I did have on my list that hopefully we'll see later. But we shall see, man. This has been very interesting so far, I gotta say, on this
Yeah,
first
no,
episode.
and yeah, I mean, like I will say, like this should be a lot higher, but I get it's at 60, and yeah, I mean, really such a, I mean, I want to say diverse because it really is, but it's like even within that, we've seen multiple people pop up more than once, and maybe not even on their own records, you know.
Right.
So and yet again, it shows you the like how many great musicians were around and playing off of each other. But we have like singer songwriter albums on here. We have classic rock staples. And then we have like these really ambitious concept albums already.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
that's what I'm saying.
it's all nowhere but up from here, folks. It's gonna be great because really you did an awesome job voting, as you always do, both Nathaniel's audience and mine combined together as this great force of music knowledge, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it. So like Nathaniel said, please to subscribe to both of us if you haven't done that already, and be sure to stick around for next week, numbers 60 to 51, baby.
Indeed. I'm so excited because I mean, there's so many great records on this list. And there will be some that, you know, may disagree on, but or we will agree on that shouldn't be as high as they are. But obviously we'll get to that when we cross that path. So in the meantime, guys, once again, make sure to subscribe to both of our channels if you like what we're doing here. Obviously, we're going to have such a great time doing this from now until, we get through this. And yeah, guys, so stay tuned for the next episode, which should be up next week on John's channel. Be sure to check it out. And until then, we will see you later.
Peace.
CJ